mentally ill individuals are vastly overrepresented in prisons. Further reforms and interdisciplinary approaches are necessary to promote better outcomes for offenders, victims, and wider society. The overrepresentation of individuals with mental illness in prison is an issue in Australia and internationally. In New South Wales, individuals with mental illness are 3 to 9 times more likely to be incarcerated than the general population, and almost half of the detainees have a diagnosed mental disorder at the time of their arrest. Australia has a long-standing history of stigmatisation, criminalisation, and incarceration of those with mental illness. The Queensland Hospital Admitted Patient Data Collection Set found significant levels of overlap between having a proven offence and psychiatric illness. Among individuals who received a psychiatric illness diagnosis, 53% also had a proven offence. This is even more prevalent in Indigenous people within the criminal justice system. The CRPD states that all individuals should be given equal rights, freedoms, and dignities. However, in Australia, this isn't always the case, with many individuals with mental illness being put in the prison system with a lack of mental health support and lack of support to ensure they receive a fair trial. Therefore, there are ethical and practical challenges of this overrepresentation. Individuals with mental illness are denied their fundamental rights at law, don't receive support, care, and protection as required by international law, and this leads to further socioeconomic disadvantage and poor life outcomes. Some explanations for this overrepresentation include the criminalization theory and the criminology theory. Criminalization theory is a long-standing theory that proposes that policy changes that led to the deinstitutionalization of psychiatric hospitals and shifted the care of people with serious mental illnesses into community mental health treatment centers led to an underfunded and overburdened mental health system. This meant that people with mental illness were unable to get medical help and support, and now they're just being managed by the criminal justice system. This deinstitutionalization occurred in Australia in the 1980s, and although initially done to support people with mental illness, bringing it back into their communities, it has had some negative effects. Since this deinstitutionalization, the number of individuals with mental illness in psychiatric hospitals decreased, but since then the number in prisons have steadily increased, suggesting they may have been inappropriately managed by prisons instead of given mental health treatment. Prisons are designed to treat mental health issues, and most crimes committed by mentally ill people are minor offences and non-violent. So it would be more practical for courts to divert offenders with mental illness into mental health treatment instead, and it would also be more cost-effective. Opponents of this theory advocate for solutions that develop and target the pre-adjudication criminal justice diversionary interventions, such as the increased funding of the mental health system, collaboration between the mental health and criminal justice systems, as well as increased police training corresponding to those with mental health disorders. The criminality theory poses that individuals with major mental disorders are overrepresented in the criminal justice system because they are more likely to have violent and criminal behavior, as well as the fact that they pose a greater number of risk factors for arrest. Proponents of this theory suggest that the proof of the criminalization theory doesn't control for legally relevant factors, such as the seriousness of the offense and prior criminal history, as well as socioeconomic factors that have been found to have an impact on offending, such as lack of education and employment. Some prominent voices in this space include Frank and Guild, who pose that the prison population after deinstitutionalization has increased for both mentally ill individuals and those without mental disorders. So this alone cannot be what is to blame for the overrepresentation. Further, Engel and Silver have found that the discretionary reasons police have for choosing to arrest individuals are the same for those with and without mental illness. They go on to state mentally ill individuals are more likely to be arrested because they're more likely to engage in violence and crime. Proponents of this theory tend to advocate for policies that aim to address the initial reasons for offending, such as socioeconomic disadvantage, and advocate for increased screening of mental health issues and increased use and funding of diversionary programs. Although this theory is good to explain the overrepresentation, some voices of this theory seem to take a simplistic approach that individuals with mental illness just behave more adversely, without addressing the institutional factors as to why they may be acting this way. Despite both theories giving a good explanation for the overrepresentation of individuals with mental illness in the criminal justice system, there are gaps in both the research. Both theories tend to take a more simplistic approach to addressing the issue when it's likely a combination of both. The research behind both theories is also fairly limited, especially in the Australian context, with a lot of research being focused in the US. The research study groups are also fairly small, so it's difficult to ascertain whether these theories are accurate in explaining the overrepresentation. Further, there are gaps in knowledge between the association between mental illness and incarceration, and there hasn't been extensive research and studies involving people in the criminal justice system. And there's been very limited research around Indigenous people with mental illness in the prison system. Both of these theories provide a good overview of the areas that need reform in order to reduce the number of individuals with mental illness that go into prisons. Reforms should be made in areas such as the funding and use of diversionary strategies in courts, increased funding of the mental health care system, increased initiatives that address socioeconomic disadvantage in communities, and increased police training for encountering offenders with mental illness. This will further address the ethical and practical issues around overrepresentation, as mental health care has been shown to be cheaper than imprisonment, and these reforms will help promote the dignity, self-determination of individuals with mental illness. Further, Indigenous prisoners are more likely to experience mental health issues due to the lack of culturally appropriate help, and therefore reforms must be made to promote Indigenous-led diversionary measures, courts, and mental health initiatives to address levels of disadvantage and intergenerational trauma Indigenous people are facing that may lead to contact with the criminal justice system. These references were chosen as they give a great overview of the background and context around the overrepresentation of individuals with mental illness in prisons. They were also chosen because they explain the two main theories on this overrepresentation, the criminalization and criminality theory, and provides critical analysis of these theories as well as what potential reforms proponents of these theories propose for better justice outcomes.